Hello, good afternoon. My name is Boluwatife Adesina, and I'll be showcasing my presentation, which is a design of a comprehensive cloud security architecture built on AWS. I'm using AWS in this example because we've been using AWS all through this course, and I just feel using AWS specific examples will make it more clear to all people, all involved. To all people trying to understand this. So yeah, let's go from there. All right. I'm going to go through the agenda, which has the introduction, the importance of a comprehensive cloud security strategy, the network security best practices. We'll go through identity and access management best practices, data security best practices, application security best practices, and then we'll come to a conclusion. All right. So, first and foremost, the scenario that was given to me was a company that has migrated its workloads to AWS without having a defined security strategy. Obviously, this is obviously going to raise a number of challenges for the company when it comes to securing their workloads or securing their applications, both or even securing their data, both at rest and in transit. So we're going to be looking at the issues that could arise if these, with this current state of undefined security strategy, and we're going to create and define a security strategy for said company, that will mitigate risks across all layers. So we'll be taking into consideration um, data security, application security, access management, logging, everything related to how to secure your workloads in the cloud. All right. So let's go on from here. So, first and foremost, we're going to look at the importance of a comprehensive cloud security strategy. The first thing that you should be looking into when the first reason you should have a comprehensive cloud security strategy is to mitigate risk. The first thing that a business is trying to do is make profit. The second thing they're trying to do is mitigate risk. So we're trying to reduce the chances in this scenario when we're talking about cloud security is to reduce the chances of unauthorized access and data breaches. When you have a data breach at the company, it immediately can affect, if it's a public company, it can affect shareholder price, and even if it's a private company, it can affect customer satisfaction and customer confidence in the company. All right. So second of all, we're going to ensure industry regulations and standards are adhered to, which is a compliance issue. So if you're not compliant with cloud security in the sense that you're not mitigating risk, then you're falling short of compliance regulations. Which, if you're collecting personally identifiable information, or you're collecting health information, could leave you liable to lawsuits. As defined under HIPAA and GDPR. All right. And thirdly, we're going to look at the importance of cloud security. A comprehensive cloud security strategy is to have operational integrity. We're going to try and keep the reliability and the performance of these cloud services as high as possible. If you look over here at the image I have here, we have pretty much the same thing. It talks about GDPR compliance, hosting in EU, and talking about IT security. Um, excuse me. Then next of all, we have the reliability, which is talking about redundancy, having multiple copies of your workloads across multiple regions, so that if one goes down, you can have a disaster management strategy to bring it back up. Then next we have access control, which has to do with IAM, or identity and access management, which we're going to touch on later, which has the identification of the unique identification of users, clear access rights, and then it enforces multi-factor authentication. And then lastly, we have network security, which has encrypted access both at rest, and data is encrypted both at rest and in transit, secure network technology, and regular checks and audits. All right. So, first and foremost, we're going to look at identity and access management best practices. To improve, the one of the very first founding blocks for a solid security strategy is to have a great identity and access management policy, because what it does is ensures that unauthorized people are not allowed to access your network or your workloads at all. So the first thing that should be implemented when you're working with IAM, or identity and access management, is the principle of least privilege. You should only grant to users the services and the permissions that they have, that they will need, the minimum that they will need to complete their work. Nothing more, nothing less. Just grant, and when they're done with said work, if you need to remove them from the network or you need to revoke their access, you can, using all these identity and access managers. So you can assign roles, and then from those roles, you can give those roles abilities to either create. If you want to give them access to EC2 workloads, they can create, or they can delete, or they can read only. You can give them specific tiers of access, which would reduce the number of people or the number of possible malicious actors that could get into the system. Because when we're talking about security in the cloud, we have AWS has their responsibility, and we have our responsibility as users. And the first thing that we have to look into is the principle of least privilege, giving the minimum level of access to users, so that they can complete their work. All right. Nextly, we are going to implement multi-factor authentication. We need multiple verification types to enhance account security. Most times they say it's something you have and something you are. So something you have is a password, and something you are is probably some kind of or biometric or voice related login. So these are just examples of types of verification that we can use to enhance account security. Then lastly, we're going to review and adjust permissions regularly using audits, the audits of access, audits of performance, and audits of just pretty much anyone that has access to the system. You regularly look over it, make sure that they're not accessing what they're not meant to, and if they've left the company, if a person leaves the company and still has access to all your workloads, things can go very wild very quickly. So it's important to always audit and look over who has access to what and when. All right. So next. So data security best practices. We're going to use data encryption, which involves encrypting data at rest and in transit. This would make sure that no malicious actor has access to the raw, personally identifiable information, you know, um, either in a database or when it's on its way to the cloud, or from on premise to the cloud, whichever way you want to do that. So, next, you're going to have backup and recovery. We need robust data disaster strategy, disaster management strategies in place, and always to have automated backups, or backups that are being taken automated regularly at automated intervals, and also having a full backup of your workload, possibly in another region. So if anything was to happen to the first region that you're working in, or your live region, maybe a data outage, something that is not even your fault, that comes from AWS, you can still recover, and because you have a backup, you can just fail over to that backup and continue from there. So next, we're going to use data loss prevention applications or data loss prevention tools. Services like Amazon Macy, that use machine learning to identify and protect sensitive data, are very important for working with these kinds of applications or these kinds of workloads. It all ties together to making sure that data it follows the CIA triad. It's confidential, it has integrity, and it's always available. These are three things that we have to work with when we're looking at data security best practices. All right. Next, in our workload, we're going to have application security best practices. You can use tools like AWS Inspector to both identify and remediate vulnerabilities that would arise when working with these kinds of workloads. So if you have an application, a three-tiered web application, you can use AWS Inspector to inspect both the S3 buckets where the files are being stored, the pipeline, if you're using Direct Connect or Route 53 to send your data to the servers, or how the data is being communicated with between those two, between storage and the application layer. It's always good to use tools like I said, AWS Inspector, to identify and remediate potential or observed vulnerabilities. So next is patch management. Um, like for example, Windows regularly delivers patches to their applications on Tuesdays. So you can hook up, if you're using AWS workloads on a Windows device, you can regularly update your applications and your dependencies to mitigate or to fight against recently discovered security flaws. If you leave your application for a while without updating them, then they become vulnerable to either zero-day exploits that were there before, or brand new emerging technologies that could cause damage to your workloads across your system. All right. It's also important actually to use automated security in this scenario to deploy your workloads using infrastructure as code to avoid the possibility of um, how do I put this, to avoid the possibility of crashes or incorrect configurations. You can use AWS Cloud Formation, which would mitigate against certain that those kinds of issues because you're using infrastructure deployed automatically as code. All right. Next, we have network security best practices. You can implement now, talking about network security best practices, you can implement a virtual private cloud, which would isolate your network and then set up appropriate subnets wherein you can do your network security. You can make sure that your network is as isolated and secure as possible. You could use SDNs as well, which is software defined networks, which would uh, calculate the most appropriate way for you to segment your networks to avoid issues with it. All right. Then you can also use security groups and network access control lists to maintain strict inbound and outbound traffic controls. And then using tools like you can have a VPN and then you have a direct connect between your VPN and your on-premise environment, on-premise data center to so that you can easily send information from there to the cloud and from the cloud back that way. All right. Next, in conclusion, without a unified security strategy in place, covering network security, identity and access management, data and app layers, becomes nearly impossible to run a secure business. You would easily, or you will be increasingly, you find it increasingly challenging to combat the data breaches and associated security issues that come with a completely unsecured network. So, a tailored security plan and continuous monitoring strategy and regular audits are crucial to any successful digital enterprise. All right. And these are my references. Thank you so much. Have a great day. Bye bye.